We all know that we want to, eliminate the bioburden that's on the instrumentation. But for us to do that in sterile processing, we need to be a team of instrument preparers and have that OR kind of do their part in getting that bioburden off of those instrumentation and keeping it moist.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now, turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Bill Filipponi, Director of Sterile Processing at North Kansas City Hospital. And Hank, we're going to be talking about surgical case carts. And this is something that everybody, well, I'd say mostly everybody deals with every day. In my mind, I'm always thinking of a closed case cart. I never think of that open case cart. And when you incorporate open case carts, you really are talking about just about every setting for surgical services. Nobody really goes without any kind of a cart. They may not all be closed case cart systems, but everybody's got carts, even surgery centers. So this is a nice broad conversation we're going to have, and it's a very unique one because everything we've been discussing this season up until now has been very static. We're talking about one section of your department, sterile storage, but when we talk about case carts, they go everywhere.
And Justin, you have not been a sterile processing tech until you have gotten inside of a case cart and the door's been shut and you've waited around until some unknowing person comes by to open it up and you scare the crap out of them. So those are the kinds of things that happens on night shift, at least. I don't know what you day shifters do, but so yeah, case carts have always had a little soft spot for me, just for the humor side of them. The one phrase that I was going to use, but it didn't really set me up for this intro, was tonight we're going to be thinking inside the box for a change. But
get ready for a power-packed episode of puns on this episode.
So without further ado, thanks for another great episode of Beyond Clean. Okay. Yeah. That's all I got. Go ahead. Take away.
All right. We'll be right back with Bill Filipponi, Director of Sterile Processing at North Kansas City Hospital, after a short break. I'm Justin Poulin.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
All right, joining us now is Bill Filipponi, Director of Sterile Processing at North Kansas City Hospital. And Bill, thanks so much for joining us. We're wrapping up this season on sterile storage, and we're going to be targeting case carts in our conversation with you today. So welcome to Beyond Clean.
Great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, I see you all over LinkedIn, so I know this is the first time you and I have had a chance to speak, but I think you have a little bit of a rapport going with Hank. But why don't you, not only for our listeners' benefit, but also for mine, tell me a little bit about your background.
Yep. So I've been in sterile processing for about 31 years. It wasn't something that I thought I would ever get into, kind of fell into it and realized that I loved it. Tried to kind of figure out ways to help my staff that I worked with and kind of use that to build my career process is more or less what I've done. It's kind of taken me all across the country, actually.
So you said you fell into it and then clearly you fell in love with it for 31 years. But how did you fall? What exactly, and you can go with either one of them. How did you fall into it or how did you fall in love with it?
Well, I was in college for a biology education degree and decided to quit. And at that point, my parents threw me out and had to get a job. So I went and got a job at a hospital.
You literally fell. They kicked you out the second story and you fell right into SPD.
That's it. Exactly. That was it.
All right. Well, let's take this not so smoothly into case carts and that conversation. But why don't we just set a baseline for the conversation? I mean, I'm sure everybody out there knows what a case cart is, but just in case they're new or maybe they're, in a setting that's not necessarily, there are some out there that don't have case carts, right? Depending on the size of the facility, whether, it's a surgery center, what kind of volume they're doing, it's possible. So when we're talking about a case cart, what is it and what is it used for?
Yep. So I think when you talk about case carts, there's a large division of what it could be, depending on the facility that you're working in. More or less what it is it actually encompasses all the supplies that is needed for a surgical procedure. And, you want that all to be available at the time that the procedure starts and then have everything that they need in that container system. There could be closed carts or open carts. I mean, we'll get into that, I'm sure, in a little bit, but.
Right. For folks, again, to just really set the baseline, like put the cookies on the lowest shelf, as they say. These things are on wheels, right? So like you said, open and close, and you said all that supplies, but it's important for this conversation to just emphasize that this is moving storage. We're talking about Sterile Storage Wars. And this is one of the only things about storage that moves around. And that obviously has an impact on how our departments interface with this, right?
Yes. I think the hardest part about it is when you're trying to say that you're tracking that storage. When you talk about moving storage, having the ability to track that storage from one area to the next.
So let's talk about tracking, because it's come up at least once in this season so far, but obviously not about case carts, to your point. And you're right, because the tracking that I'm used to doing on a case cart is you scan that case cart. There's a timestamp that says maybe what time you scanned it out of the department or maybe the department that you were planning to take it to. But after it leaves that spot, you really kind of lose track of it, don't you?
It all depends on how deep your tracking system goes. There are facilities that track products to the case cart. There are facilities that track products to the OR room. There are some facilities that you can track to the patient. So you can actually know exactly where that instrumentation is. At our facility currently, we track to the case cart and then we pick up the tracking back at the decontamination room.
Great. So you're giving us a little bit of workflow there, but let me go back to the beginning. Can you kind of paint that picture of what is a normal day in the flow of a case cart? You can start, like we say, the beginning, but we've kind of had some surprises on the podcast over the last couple of seasons of where people start when we say the beginning, but you can start wherever you want to in this workflow of a case cart.
Yep. So at current facility, we have preference cards that print out at 9 a.m. the day before a surgery. More or less the recipe card that tells us what actually goes on to that each and individual case cart. At that point, we will start pulling the disposables, reusables, and placing them onto that case cart for the next day. Working throughout the day, we roughly do around 70 cases a day. So we're pulling pretty much that whole day for the next day. The hardest part, I think, right now at that point is making sure that you have enough supplies, disposable or reusable, for those cases. You don't want to have to come in at 7 o'clock the next morning and realize you don't have something that you need for cases. When we look at that, we look at, having the right person pulling the supplies for those carts. Maybe you have somebody that's pulling disposable stuff that doesn't really know all of the disposable side of it. So you have to make sure that you're having the right people in the right places for pulling those carts.
So where do you stage them? Because, that's an all day process like you described. And so it's kind of a work in progress, right? So how are you staging them so that they can continue to be stocked throughout the day?
Yeah. So one of the lucky things that I have at my facility is space. It is literally the biggest SPD that I've ever been into. I mean, I've been in quite a few, but the amount of space that we have, we can stage roughly about 50 carts in my SPD department. They are staged by case time and then room number. So they're actually in an order. So if you're looking for a certain case, you'll have the ability to go right to a certain area and know exactly where where that case or timed case or whatever room it is.
So I kind of look at it like it's a herd of case carts, right? We get them all herded and then we take them from one point to another. And, maybe they go in single file, maybe not, but they definitely do if you've got a dedicated elevator that only fits one. But I kind of look at it like we really are. It's like we're directing the flow of this case cart's life, and you can almost kind of humanize it, right? Because it takes this journey from, sterile storage area up into the OR through that process. Then it probably sits outside of the dedicated elevator for 4 hours after the cases. I'm just kidding. Then it gets sent down and it goes into, into decon. But where are the hiccups and the breakdowns in that kind of cycle? Because we did humanize it, and there's always, you do 70 cases. There's always that one case cart that's got like the snagging wheel that won't rotate, or it spins all the way around. Like there's always kind of like that one case cart. I always feel bad for that case cart because I feel like it, endures a lot of profanity throughout the day as it's trying to move from point A to point B. But, that is a frustration, right? But what are some of the other breakdowns that happen, as that case cart is moving through that process?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest one is when you have somebody maybe moving a case cart that's not used to moving the case carts around, maybe placing them in a spot where they're not able to be found as quickly. Like I stated before, we have a large area in our SPD, but our OR does not have that large area. So they have the ability to house maybe one case cart extra other than the one that they're doing. So there's a lot of movements of case carts when it comes time the day of the surgery. So if someone actually parks a cart in the wrong place that doesn't realize it doesn't go there, carts can get misplaced and lost. And like I said, we track to the cart, not to the OR room. So if someone puts it in the wrong spot, it becomes an issue. I think the biggest thing probably is the fact of if you are missing something from a case cart, that someone just walks up to a case cart and grabs something off of it. There's the idea of, well, I need this for my case. My case is going right now. I'll just take this. If there's not a good mechanism for communicating that case cart goes empty until the next case, and they're like, well, we don't have what we need. I think the communication, when you talk about, taking something, obviously we all want our patients to have what they need during their surgery. Right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that next case cart and communicating that information so we can get what's needed on that cart back and refilled.
Yeah, those nurses and techs are notorious for pillaging those case carts. And you're right. In the moment, they're thinking about their patient, and we can understand that, right? Because it is their patient. It is happening right now. But the proverbial crap rolls downhill and it hits sterile processing, because when that next case cart is pulled in, who gets blamed for it not being complete? It's not the OR staff. They're calling down saying, hey, you check this off. It's not here. What's going on? And then, that mad scramble happens, because if we didn't know that it was taken, we haven't been prioritizing any kind of turnover to ensure that it would be ready by the next case. So all of that stuff just continues to steamroll. What are your thoughts? Like I've got my own thoughts about this, but I want to know yours on the topic of locking case carts. Do you do it in your facility? Have you been in facilities that do it? It's like, why not?
Yeah. So, I think, when you look at a crash cart or a code cart, we lock those, right? Why? Because we don't want an emergency. We don't want that to have to happen. I think that having the ability to lock a cart with a breakable lock is a great idea. We do not do that at our facility. I feel like we have a good communication system. We use a missing card that's right on the front of the cart. So if somebody takes something off a cart, they just put that card on top of the cart, and that gives us that, communication. Now, we do have to be walking by and see that card, but it's still a lot easier, right? We want to make it an easy process to communicate that there's something missing from that card. If it's difficult, like if that nurse has to stop what she's doing and call 3 people and tell them what happened and what she's doing and when she needs another, that's when things get missed. I think if you make it as easy as possible for people to communicate, that's the biggest step, I think.
So we have a sister podcast called First Case, and that's obviously targeted for the operating room. But we discussed this on a show probably about 2 or 3 months ago. Co-host Melanie Perry was talking about how that pilfering happens. And that was really the topic, of our conversation. And she was like, she was a team lead for ortho. And she said, I would never dream of taking something off of somebody else's case cart without telling them. But it is a huge common source of frustration in the OR. And despite the fact that you all may be getting the call, I think the OR knows that they go and grab off of each other's carts, especially if it's one of those cultural things that's allowed. So let's say you don't do the locks. You're kind of caught into this little he said, she said trap, right? And so what are some other ways to navigate that? If there's somebody that's listening and their facility also does not lock the case carts to show that it's been tampered with and something possibly was taken out, how do you kind of get to the root cause and work on process improvement to get at the root issue?
Yeah. So, I think, like I said in the beginning, the biggest thing is communication, is being able to communicate with your sterile processing team and your OR team. We have a process improvement team that meets, that's the OR and sterile processing team, that we have these discussions, we discuss all of these. We do use our tracking system when we pull cases. So we actually scan every tray to that case cart. So we know that if that tray was scanned, we know that was on the cart, because it isn't like they typed something in and said, hey, or they put a check mark or they highlighted a line and said that was there. They actually scanned the barcode on the tray and put it on the cart.
Yeah, that data transparency.
So there's a couple
piece.
different ways. Yes.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Well, a couple of minutes ago, Justin cut you off on the workflow of the case cart. I think we pick the cases and we send them to the OR, but there's a little bit more that happens with that. Sorry, I just love opportunities to throw Justin under the case cart. So, I'm going to do that tonight. So yeah, pick us up. We've scanned them. They're going up to the OR. They're outside the room. Then what happens?
Yep. So we stage ours in sterile processing. We have them staged in sterile processing. We move first cases to the corresponding OR rooms the night before the surgeries, and we move second cases to like a pass-through door before the surgeries. So first and second cases are all at the rooms. All the other ones are staged in sterile processing, and they stay there. We are lucky. We do have the benefit of being right next door to the OR. So,
dude, you got the space, you got the location. Like, where can people send hate mail to you? That's what I want to know.
Right.
Or a resume, one or the other.
Yeah. Either one.
I've been in a lot of facilities, and I've been 2 stories down. I've been 3 stories up. I've been, so I've worked in places that are tiny. So I've been in all of them. So we definitely are lucky in our area of where we're at. So staged right in sterile processing. And then as the day goes on, the nursing staff are actually the ones that come and get their own case cards for the next cases. ORs finish. Soiled instrumentation is placed back into that case card, and it's wheeled to the decontamination room by one of the techs or environmental services staff, and it comes right into the decontamination area.
And so I'm going to set you up with what everybody calls a softball, okay? It's going to be in reference to one of the most recent things that you've done with Beyond Clean at one of our global conferences. And it's on that topic that you, like, very professionally but very quickly described as, after the case, it goes in the case cart and it comes downstairs. But there's something else that happens or should happen that you've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort working on at your facility. So can you walk us through that little internal stage for case cart workflows?
Yeah, so you're talking about the pre-treatment of instrumentation before it gets into the case cart. It was definitely a big project at our facility. It was something that we've worked on. We've kind of rolled out a full educational plan through the OR educator and myself, and kind of put a focus on that pre-treatment of instrumentation before we get it in the decontamination room. We all know that we want to, eliminate the bioburden that's on the instrumentation, but for us to do that in sterile processing, we need to be a team of instrument preparers and have that OR kind of do their part in getting that bioburden off of those instrumentation and keeping it moist.
Right. So if anybody missed that episode, I guess that session at the conference, we'll try to post a link to this show so you can go track it down and check out Bill's presentation. So let's go back to case carts kind of design style. And I've got this question that I like to ask folks about the manufacturer side of these things, because if you look at, how case carts have transitioned over the last couple of decades, they haven't really changed that much if you're not looking very close at them. But, what are some issues that you have, or maybe some ideas that you have for how case carts can be better improved? Or again, like back to kind of that first question, what are some things that are just annoying about how current case carts are today?
Yeah. So, I think there's, when we look at case carts, let's look at two different types of case carts. You have a closed case cart system and you have an open case cart with maybe it's a wire rack. When you look at a wire rack, you're going to need some type of cover. You're going to need some type of solid bottom shelf on that case cart. I think people sometimes get confused when you look at like wire racks and they say, well, we don't need to have that solid shelf on the bottom or a cover. Depending on how far you're going, you still need to have a cover and that solid shelf on the bottom. So when you look at wire racks, I think those are the important things. But I think people try to go, nobody wants to invest tons of dollars in just a cart that moves their supplies. So it's important to make sure that you research and find the right open cart for your purpose. Obviously, the biggest cart that most people use are the closed container systems. What I've seen, obviously, over the years is a lot of times places don't have the correct sizes of carts, right? Carts come in all different sizes, shapes, forms, depending on the types of cases you're doing. If you're doing a multitude of different cases, you want to have a multitude of different size carts available to you. When I look at carts, also what plays a part in that is, are you doing a manual wash or an automatic wash? If you're doing a manual wash, you want to make sure that you have the ability to reach down into a cart. If you're cleaning 70 carts a day and you've got to bend over and kind of get down inside of a cart that's got a shelf that won't come out, that you got to bend over and squeeze under, it makes it obviously much more difficult to make sure that that's getting cleaned correctly. And if it's difficult, it's probably not getting cleaned correctly.
Right.
People find ways to get around it. I've gone into a decontamination room before and found a Johnny mop on a stick, and they said, well, that's how I reached the back of the case cart. Right. Well, and we know that that's not the correct way to clean a case cart. So, the design of that, depends on the type of manual or mechanical cleaning you're doing. One of the things that we ran into with mechanical cleaning when we purchased some new carts was our cart washer wasn't leaning far enough to empty all the water out of them. The angle that was in the bottom of the case cart was different than the angle that our cart cleaner angled up. So we ended up, when that would come out, it would be full of hot water. We know that if there's standing water, that cart's not clean either. So we had to do some adjustments with our angle of our cart cleaner to try to get it up a little bit higher to kind of alleviate that. So
I don't know what planet I've been living on in sterile processing, but I just learned like last week about that angle at the bottom of a case cart. I always knew that the cart washer would angle, but I had no idea that they're actually manufacturing these things with an internal like angle in there for that specific reason.
Don't feel bad, Hank. I just learned that.
Okay, there you go. Welcome to the club there, Justin.
I think the angle in there is, obviously if something spills in there, you don't want it to be leaking out the front of that case cart when you're walking down the hall, right? They want to try and keep all that internalized. Went into a facility that said, that they had that problem. Their cart washer didn't lean. So their carts were full of water. Like every time and I said, well, what did you do? And they said, well, we fixed it. We just drilled holes in the back of the case carts, and now all the water just comes out. I'm like,
wow.
Well, what if you have something spill in there?
It's
going to leak out. Right?
It drains out too. The only thing that retains are objects larger than the holes.
Right, exactly.
The instruments, some of the time.
So we want to watch where we take our ingenuity too, and make sure we're doing the right things as well.
That's a good call. And actually that ingenuity piece, like it goes back to what we were talking about, the manual cleaning of these devices. And I really see that as a big gap in the industry, because there's nothing that hurts the soul of a sterile processing technician more than to clock in and someone tell you the cart washer is down today. Like it just goes right to your core. And to your point, it's challenging to do that correctly, no matter what, no matter who you are, no matter how willing you are to go the extra mile to do it, because I don't really feel like these devices have been manufactured to be manually clean. They're really manufactured to be mechanically cleaned. And so then we have a gap, similar to some of the other complex devices that we talk about. So where do you sit on that? Like, do you agree, disagree? Have you found any other kind of best practice for cleaning besides not doing it with the mop head?
Right. So, I would definitely agree with that statement of it's when you look at manual cleaning of a case card, it's difficult. It's a difficult process. Do I think that people are getting that task completed 100% correctly? I would say no. When you look at all of the moving parts, ball bearings inside of a case cart, and then you talk about you're placing, any type of bioburden material into there that could be moving around inside that cart, trying to say that you're going to go in with a rag and wipe it off and get it, 100% clean is probably not the right answer. When we look at the wheels on case carts, if you're hand washing a case cart, I don't know how many people actually take the time to, raise that case cart up off the ground and wipe those wheels off before it goes out. I started in a facility that never had a cart washer. We didn't have a cart washer, but one of the things that we had was a steam gun, right? So we used a steam gun. That's what we cleaned our case carts with. So it was a little bit better where it was like, we had water and soap and detergent and steam that we could actually use to spray.
Like a car wash.
It's almost like it was like a big cart wash. Yeah. With it had two valves on it, one for water, one for steam. Obviously it was dangerous, right? Cause you're using a hot steam gun inside of a room that, so you touch it on your arm or something, it's going to melt right through a gown and burn you. But, there are a lot of places that don't have either the space or the ability to pay for a cart washer. So, those places are out there. I can tell you right now, like at my facility, we have one cart washer. I would love to have two, right? For the amount of carts that we do. So if our cart washer goes down, we are manually cleaning carts, and manually cleaning, 70 plus carts a day is a chore. I'm buying a lot of free lunches when those days come around. I can tell you that.
Probably Hank's favorite pizza. So,
wow,
that was too easy. You just threw me under the case cart. Yeah. So you had it coming, buddy.
Yeah.
The infamous pizza article continues to live. Okay.
Right.
So, Bill, nobody knows that we're literally in the middle of SPD week as we record this. But when Hank was throwing me under the case cart, he also mentioned, the wheels or casters, I think is, how we like to refer to them. Some of them are sealed. Some of them are not sealed. Some get rusty. Stickers get stuck on these case cards. Like lots of things happen. They get banged. They get dented. They've got, rubber bumpers around the edge in a lot of cases that go up and hit the shoe molding on the walls and all the guards. There's so many things that happen to these case carts over time. Latches, springs break, all kinds of things. So, we talk a lot on this show about preventive maintenance for like the instruments and the devices, but we have not talked much about preventive maintenance for case carts. As I kind of throw this last question before we wrap at you, I'm teeing it up with that one because I feel like that's a best practice that if people are not doing it today, they should definitely be considering it. Cause I mentioned that one wiggling wheel or the wheel that keeps getting froze up that just makes everybody's day so much more frustrating over something so simple. What are not only that, what's your take on PM, but then also what are some considerations for really just building like a best in class program for case carts?
Yeah. So one of the things that I can say about preventative maintenance of case carts is that you need to incorporate your plant operations department or your biomedical team, whoever does repairs of your equipment. One of the first things that I did when I go into a facility is I make sure that the plant operations team, the places that are going to be doing some work, have the ability to buy those parts. So if I have carts, my plant operations has spare parts. They have spare casters. They have the shoe molding around the outside of it. They have spare bearings for the shelves. We have a biohazard clean wheel on the backside of a cart. So if one of those cracks and breaks, they have extras to replace those. It's that teamwork approach when you look at these case carts to kind of develop. They don't know. If you put a work order and say, hey, this caster's bad on this case card, they come up, they look at it like, we don't have casters, right? But if you go down and actually get and speak with them and say, look, these are the types of case cards that I have, and these are the part numbers for all of those that, either they can build a supply of those or actually, order them when needed. That's the biggest thing that I can say is if you have a case cart that has a squeaky wheel, a stuck wheel, your staff shouldn't have to say, I got this yesterday, I got this the day before. They should know that if they get it, they put a work order in and it gets replaced. You don't want to have to deal with that cart that the door, every time you walk out of the department, the door swings open, right? And bangs against the wall. That is not what you want. If that happens to you one time, you put that work order in, it's going to get fixed. And that's kind of, when you need to look at, even when you're buying new, we have 2 different types of case carts now currently. And when we were buying new ones, we went to our maintenance department and said, hey, look, this is what the new one is. These are the parts. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a good idea? Do you feel like you can replace these if something would happen? We kind of got buy-in from both sides when we were looking at new case carts.
Great. All right, Bill, fantastic job on the interview today. You kind of pinch hit for us last minute too. We got you squeezed in with about 1 hour's notice. So I just want the audience to know that you did a rock star job without any opportunity to prepare. We just kind of put you out here and we rolled with it. See, There we go, Hank. That's how you rolled out a pun.
Well done. Touche.
Anyway, Bill, thanks so much for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the opportunity.
That was Bill Filipponi, Director of Sterile Processing at North Kansas City Hospital. And we're talking about case carts on this episode, and we are kind of winding things down, but an important part of sterile storage. And as you duly noted, it's on the go. It's sterile storage on the go. And so I thought Bill did a fantastic job. Never mind the fact that we gave him no notice. I think he definitely came in prepared and ready to go. And just some of the things about where the hiccups are, especially that communication piece, like we emphasize that several times. I feel like we talk about communication at least 3 times on every show, but it really is critical when you start talking about supplies that are missing from the case carts. There are plenty of people that have been caught in the crossfire or he said, she said. And I like how he said, all right, well, one solution might be those breakaway locks, just like you would have on the containers to show that the case cart had been tampered with. But another one is to have really good data and to say with empirical evidence that this consumable or this tray or whatever was on this case cart today. And so even though it wasn't when you had it in the OR, something happened in between. I think just, having that and then having, I think something else that he mentioned in following up on that is a process improvement team that pulls OR and SPD together. So then everybody is working on less the he said, she said, and more on how do we fix this and how do we make it repeatable and sustainable.
And all these little intersections between staffing, we talked about technology, we talked about communication, as you were just talking about. All of that is like zeroed in on this one small part of the workflow. And then you kind of scale that out across the entire workflow and everything that needs to get done to bring a device from dirty to clean to sterile to the patient. It is such a challenging job in sterile processing, and even in just this little sterile storage area that we've been talking about for this season. And all of that has to come to play in any one of those. If you're missing the technology, if you're missing the communication piece, it's going to break that process. So I agree. I think Bill did a terrific job, and he really highlighted the need to be on top of things at every step of that workflow and every one of those intersections that comes into it.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support Beyond Clean by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts. You can also find us on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or just search for Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast application. We've also got bonus content for you. All you got to do is download our smartphone app for iPhone and Android. Hey, and while you're there, why don't you give us a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. If you have any topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode, just send an email on over to info@beyondclean.net. And on behalf of Hank and myself, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean.